Hello, Gold participants from around the world. I'm Fleur Bickford, Program Director and MC for GOLD Lactation 2016. I'm chatting today with Jodi Hall about her upcoming presentation titled Beyond Screening, Nurturing Safer Spaces to Elicit and Respond to Disclosures of Abuse. So Jodi, welcome and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So to start with, maybe you could just tell us a little bit about yourself. I know our delegates love to hear a little bit about our speakers and their professional journey. So how did you begin this journey?
Well, actually, I'd like to title this part of my professional life as being my worlds collided. And I had been raised by a mom who was a labor and delivery room nurse, and I grew up with lots of wonderfully rich stories about this transition into parenting journey and what was involved with supporting individuals and families through this incredible time in their life. But there was this one occasion when I was quite a small child where I overheard my mother debriefing about a particularly distressing birth that she had been a part of. And I didn't know at that time how foundational that listening to the stories would be to shaping this work today. Years later, these seemingly isolated experiences led me to form a safe passage, which really was a combination of my experiences from childhood and hearing those stories with my later work as a violence against women's counselor and my work in the birth community and looking for resources to support women in my care and feeling really unprepared to support people who had experienced trauma in their life, whether it was childhood sexual abuse, sexual violence, or women abuse. And in the context of working within a domestic violence counseling program, there was an occasion within which a woman who was coming to seek my support within the counseling program was also somebody who I had arranged to have a doula provide her with care. And all of a sudden, these two worlds collided. The one world of birth work, which I believed was quite separate at that time from my violence against women's work, even though I had had prior training or awareness about how abuse could show up in the lives of women. But it was at that time that I really felt the unpreparedness that I know that many of my other colleagues have felt as they've tried to support people who have complex histories of trauma and are entering into this time of great transition in their life.
Okay, thank you for that, Jodi. And what you were saying about feeling unprepared for, dealing with women who have a history of trauma, it kind of leads into the next question. And the next question I have for you is, what do you think is the biggest barrier when it comes to healthcare providers asking clients about abuse? Because it's such an important topic, but I know that it's one that just doesn't get addressed often enough. So what do you think is the reason for that?
I think the reasons are incredibly complex, and they're a combination of reasons both personally, what's happening for the healthcare provider. It could be related to their own experiences of trauma or abuse in their own life that leaves them feeling quite vulnerable to asking or screening for abuse in their client population when this might be an experience that hits close to home, or it may be something that they're actually living with at the present time. There are also issues within the practice environment. So what is the culture within which that healthcare provider is practicing? Is it an environment that recognizes and understands the prevalence of abuse in the lives of pregnant and parenting people, and as a community of practice have taken it upon themselves to develop the skills necessary to support the issues that can arise? And then I think that all of that contributes to issues at a policy level in terms of what does the best available research evidence support. And we are still trying to figure out what might be some of the unanticipated consequences of people disclosing to healthcare providers ongoing abuse or past abuse, whether that's inviting child protection into that time in a woman's life where that person didn't really understand the duty to report legislation that a healthcare provider might be under, or it could be reprisal violence from a person who is being abusive to that person in the care. What happens if the pregnant person takes steps to leave the abusive relationship, but the resources in the community are that she has to sit on a waiting list? And then what happens when that person needs to return home? What is the risk to that pregnant person if they've demonstrated wanting to end the relationship. We know that abuse escalates, or her risk of abuse escalating and lethality escalates at a time where the person attempts to leave the abusive relationship or has left. So I think that there are barriers, resources, there are barriers in terms of training, there are barriers in terms of fear, and there's really a lack of clarity in terms of what will happen for somebody if we have not been able to provide them with adequate support. Do we in fact risk making the situation worse if we're not trauma informed in the way that we go about creating spaces for people to disclose?
Okay, thank you for that. And yeah, it's obviously a very complex issue, and thank you for, breaking a little bit of that down and giving us a little bit of a sneak peek. And I'm very excited to have you presenting on this for us. It's, obviously it's a difficult topic, but such an important one. So I'm hoping that you could just give us a little bit more of a look into what your presentation is going to touch on. Just briefly share with us a little bit about that and what you hope delegates will take away from your presentation and be able to take back to their practice.
Sure. So in addition to actually walking through an exercise where we will consider what are the pros and cons of not asking about abuse, or an indicator model of abuse versus something that's more routine, we will look at what the pros and cons of those various approaches are for both the care provider and also potentially from the perspective of people who seek our care. So we'll be spending some time really looking at those various issues. What I'd also like us to really look at, and for delegates to take away, is considering how do we move beyond this language of screening. Screening is a really important way of thinking about why women abuse is an important public health issue to attend to, but it also is a very medicalized approach to what might be something different that is needed in the lives of pregnant people who are experiencing abuse. So what might be, or what are some of the ways that we can look at creating a safer space to elicit and respond to disclosures that has to do with practicing from a trauma-informed perspective or using a trauma-informed lens. So we're going to spend some time looking at what are trauma-informed approaches to creating safer spaces. We're also going to consider a topic that goes not often talked about in healthcare provider circles, which is safety planning for people that are in our care, but also safety consideration for ourselves. And that ties in with pragmatic issues around what do we need to do with to enhance safety when we're working with clients who potentially are living in situations that are unsafe, but also looking at things around boundaries that support our emotional, spiritual, mental, psychological well-being, spiritual well-being when we are bearing witness to atrocities in the lives of our clients, and that work can take a toll on ourselves as healthcare providers, which I actually believe also contributes to why we might not be intentionally asking about histories of abuse, is that people can become burnt out. So let's think about and talk about what we need in order to do this work with enhanced safety for ourselves. And the other piece is really around advocacy and what advocacy looks like in the lives of people who are experiencing perhaps not only violence within their intimate partnership, but are also dealing with aspects of their identities that are impacted by discrimination and the larger structural or systemic issues that are reinforcing these situations to be unsafe and make it difficult to access services, to be believed, and to be appropriately supported in a timely manner.
Okay, thank you, Jodi. I love the idea of going beyond screening, and it sounds fascinating. I'm really looking forward to your presentation. So thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today.
Thank you. I look forward to our time to talk more about it.
Wonderful, thank you. So for our delegates who are listening, you'll be able to hear more from Jodi with her presentation titled Beyond Screening, Nurturing Safer Spaces to Elicit and Respond to Disclosures of Abuse. And her live presentation day is Tuesday, April 19th at 2100 UTC. So we look forward to having you join us then. Goodbye for now, everyone.